So that's the basic structure of the client library, which we will have included. It's in the lab below. Let's look at what we do with it now in donation service, particularly how we can start to simplify a little bit of the structure of the application and review the overall project layout. Okay, donation service. That's what our project looks like now. It's getting quite substantial, as you can see. We've got our services, we've got our view models, and then we've got our application and home view models, or routers up at the top. This is only one way of doing it, by the way. If you're looking at all at the TypeScript version, then I have a slightly different structure laid out. Particularly this here might be perhaps a little bit too fussy. So another pattern you'll see in Aurelia apps is to have a components folder, and then all the view models just go into the components folder directly. That might simplify it slightly. You can have a peek at the TypeScript lab to see what that looks like. The focus here though is just to look now at what we've done to services. We've already centralized all access to our model, if we call it that, in donation service. In Aurelia Lab 3, the last lab, this was all just held in a local data structure. And now with the Aurelia HTTP client, we can start to augment that, replacing it largely with a version of donation service that accesses the remote API, the donation API. There should be no need to change any view models, because the view models have not or have no interest in contacting the API directly. They all go through donation service. We're also going to introduce an additional class into the services folder. We're calling it async HTTP client, and this is going to be quite similar to the client we were using in the unit tests for donation web. That is, it's going to wrap up our interaction with the API and keep donation service reasonably simple. Let's look at this HTTP client class we're going to build. It's quite a light, simple enough wrapper. It's not really doing too much more than the HTTP client does already. So it's essentially a wrapper around it. But in the next lab or two, we will be making some changes in here, particularly when we look at some security features. So for the moment, this new class we've implemented incorporates just a few of the methods we need. We have get to retrieve from the remote API. We have post, and we have delete. And you can see in the implementations here, they're just passing on the calls directly to get, post, and delete. Also notice that we are configuring the remote URI a little bit differently. That is the API address of our donation application. And this is carried out here in the constructor. And in fact, we're pulling in the base URI we're going to use from our fixtures. So our fixtures are replaced now largely with just the URL of the donation web where it happens to be deployed. Let's look at donation service now in a bit more detail. This is the version we're going to be using in the lab today. We've removed the loading of the fixtures of the candidates and users and donations. So in our donation service now, they're all empty data structures initially. And as we looked at the last slide deck, we are bringing in then here preloading of candidates and users. So we are retrieving those from the API when we start up. And this is what they look like. Trigger the API candidates or the API users URLs. Now you'll notice we are not specifying here the address of the remote server. That's coming in through fixtures. We'll look at that in a moment. We're just specifying the part of the API, the endpoint, if you like, in abstract terms. Also notice we're doing add candidate. Add candidate now posts a new candidate to the remote service. So we're using the API post, and we're also keeping a local copy here of the candidates if the API call went successfully. And here is our donation, posting a new donation to a candidate, and then we're keeping local copy of the donation so we can just dribble them up on the screen, and then we're publishing the donations, the successful donations, so the stats screen will be updated. Finally, we just look at the login and logout. We've seen this before. It hasn't really changed. When we're logging in, we're just checking to see if our user matches one of the users we've downloaded, and if we do, we publish a new event. And if we want to log out, we just publish a logout event. Logout means false, login means true. You might notice that this isn't quite satisfactory. Our donation service loads all of the users, and then we're just rifling through the users here looking for a matching user for the one who's just trying to log in. We'll obviously be trying to fix this in a subsequent lab. So a little demonstration then of what this should start to look like now. We've got to, first of all, make sure we're running donation web itself. So I can run the application here, it's launching. You'll notice failing here because we haven't launched the MongoDB. So if we launch MongoDB and restart, then we should get a successful launch this time. We're dribbling up here on the screen the candidate fixtures. In the client then, we run the client by entering au run -- watch. Remember, that's going to be rebuilding the app for us, and then it's going to be available running locally. Once it launches successfully, we should be able to see it here. And we can have both the server and the client running at the same time if you want. This is the server. If I log in as Marge, I can see the donations. This is the client. It's on 9,000. I can log in as Marge, go to dashboard, attempt to make a donation. We just donated 3. That should now be visible on the server. So if I go over here and refresh here, we see we've got the new donation 3 has arrived. So this is the client and this is the server. Notice that the donor is missing. That's again an incomplete aspect to what we've been doing. We need to figure out what would it mean for us to know who the donor is. So although we can make donations successfully, and although the web app itself supports donor correctly, we can see it here, Marge, our client doesn't really yet support that properly. So we're seeing the client made donations, the candidate is fine, but donor is missing. Okay, that's the topic for subsequent labs.